Hi there, I'm Christine Van Geyn, and this is the Freedom Update, a new bi-weekly video podcast from the Canadian Constitution Foundation, where we talk about our ongoing cases, highlight some new legal developments from across the country, and talk about our upcoming events and how you can get involved. Thanks for joining us, and let's talk about freedom. We got big news on October 6th with the release of a decision in a freedom of expression case we've been involved in Saskatchewan. On October 6th, the result from a case involving Carolyn Strom and the Nursing Disciplinary Committee in Saskatchewan was released, and the court sided with Carolyn Strom, with the Canadian Constitution Foundation, and with the right to free expression. So here are the facts. In 2015, Carolyn Strom, who was a registered nurse on maternity leave, had posted a few comments on Facebook about what she viewed as substandard care that her ailing grandfather had received at the end of his life. He was in a long-term care facility, and she criticized some of this care. Although her criticism was balanced, it used non-inflammatory language, and she didn't name any names. And in fact, she also praised some of the care her grandfather received and attached a news article about how we need to improve palliative care in Saskatchewan. For all of this, for standing up for the protection of her own beloved grandfather, Carolyn Strom was dragged before the Nursing Disciplinary Committee, which concluded that her off-duty comments amounted to professional misconduct and that it harmed the reputation of nurses. She was ordered to pay a $1,000 fine and an additional $25,000 for the cost of the proceeding against her. This is a total affront to Carolyn Strom's right to free expression. The Discipline Committee found that Ms. Strom's comments amounted to professional misconduct because it harmed the reputation of nurses. And they said that if she had a complaint, she needed to use formal channels. So complaining to individual nurses, then their managers, then the facility, then the region, and then ultimately the Minister of Health, until all her options were exhausted before she could make a post on social media. If we've learned anything from the current crisis, it's that these so-called proper channels are slow and often don't work at all. Nurses shouldn't need to jump through bureaucratic hoops in order to stand up for the rights of someone they love when they're off duty. In fact, one of the things we've learned in this pandemic is that nurses have been some of the most outspoken advocates for improving long-term care, and they've stood up for many long-term care residents who are unable to stand up and speak for themselves. The court sided ultimately with Carolyn Strom, and now because of this decision, nurses don't need to worry about looking over their shoulder to wonder if their regulator is going to come down and discipline them for standing up for the people that they love or speaking out about the conditions of care that they observe. Now it's time for our cross-country case update. And there's some interesting constitutional cases from across Canada, and this week we're going to be checking in with Ontario, where two cases have caught our attention. The first is a decision that was released in a case called Canadian Snowbirds and the Attorney General of Ontario. This is a case where the Ontario government was sued by a group of travelers called the Snowbirds because they fly south for the winter. They were sued for canceling a program that provides an amount of government coverage, government-funded health care for travelers when they're outside of Canada. Premier Doug Ford continued his losing streak in the Ontario courts. The Divisional Court ordered the government to restore the funding. But to us, the interesting part of this case was that the court found that the traveler's charter right to life, liberty, and security of person was not violated by the program ending. This is because travelers, to quote the court, still have the right to take steps to protect those rights, including paying for medical services abroad either directly or indirectly through a private insurer. So the right to security of person, to protect your health, isn't violated because you're free to purchase traveler's insurance. And to me, this seems a very reasonable conclusion. Imagine the outrage if a traveler was denied both government health care and the right to purchase traveler's insurance. This would put travelers in an untenable position. They wouldn't be able to receive care through the government, but they'd also simultaneously be restricted from paying for insurance to buy the care that they need. This would surely be a violation of life and security. But in truth, we don't need to use our imagination, because this is the reality of thousands of Canadians within our own borders. Thousands of patients languish on wait lists and are at the same time denied the right to buy private insurance. It's simply an absurd outcome that on the current law in Canada, government has an obligation to reimburse travelers for medical expenses while abroad, but at home, patients are restricted from seeking medical care outside of the public system. Another case that caught my attention involves what are called naturalized gardens in the city of Toronto. A naturalized garden is one that allows native plants to flourish and grow wildly, and they have a great ecological benefit. They create habitats for birds and small urban mammals like chipmunks or squirrels or rabbits, and they allow pollinator plants for bees to flourish. But there's a tension between the Toronto government's push for these natural pollinator gardens and at the same time the existence of a bylaw that relates to the height of grass and the growth of weeds. A conviction under the tall grass bylaw includes forced mowing of your garden at the owner's cost and fines of up to $5,000. Now, an unusual situation arose involving a professor from Ryerson who teaches landscape ecology and urban planning. And she lives in quite a nice part of town. And at her home, she maintains a naturalized garden, which has a green roof, terraced planting beds, and a natural meadow in her front yard. She works with a local landscape service to maintain this naturalized garden at not an insignificant expense. Now, naturalized gardens are not to everybody's taste. Some people think that they are a little too unruly, they're a little too wild looking for their personal taste. But this professor should be entitled to maintain her own garden on her own property as she sees fit. Now, to her surprise, she was told that her garden violated the tall grass and weed bylaw. While unfortunately our Constitution does not protect personal property rights, it does provide protection for freedom of expression. And gardens are expressive. They can actually be an art form. And naturalized gardens in particular are a form of expression about the owner's belief about our environment and ecology. The weed and tall grass bylaw needs to comply with our Constitution because of its intersection with freedom of expression. And in Toronto, the bylaw lacks definitions for grass. It uses broad and arbitrary terms like excessive growth, and it lacks a prescribed standard. The law is arbitrary. And the enforcement process is complaints-driven, which means a nosy neighbor who might have different tastes from you can complain and send a bylaw officer to your home to complain about what you're doing on your own property or to investigate what you're doing on your own property. We agree that this professor's constitutional rights were violated when she was told her garden is a bylaw violation because the law is vague and arbitrary, and a court would likely find it's unconstitutional. So right now, the professor has proposed changes to the bylaw, and we'll be watching to see what happens. Hopefully the city amends their bylaw to make it compliant with our charter right to express ourselves through our own property. If you have an interesting case that you'd like us to highlight, send me a message on Twitter. You can reach me at @CVanGeyn. We have some exciting events that are coming up that you can be a part of. The main one is happening on November 7th, where I'll be participating in the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference, formerly known as the Manning Conference. The conference is being held all virtually this year and, as always, has an incredible lineup of speakers. I'll be on a panel discussing our constitutional concerns about government regulation of social media networks. You can sign up by visiting canadastrongandfree.network. The cost is $31.50. That's all for this update. Thanks for tuning in, and let's keep fighting for freedom in Canada.